Hi, I'm Jason from StrataGames. Happy New Year to anybody who observes the Gregorian calendar. We're playing some more Pauper. This is Mono Blue Terror. This is a deck that I played previously on the channel and did really well with, and hadn't played in a couple of months, but I decided just to give it a try, and I got a leg that was pretty interesting. So there's not necessarily a stock list of this deck I've found. It's gone through a few different iterations. A couple months ago, people started playing a lot of frantic inventories in the deck, which I think is pretty cool, and I wanted to give a try. I also saw some using Dragon Wings, but I decided not to try that one out this time. I think part of the reason it was used is to hedge against Toxin Analysis Shaman combo, and personally, I haven't been seeing that combo as much. I still see plenty of Grixis, plenty of Jund, but I just haven't run up against that a lot personally. That might be anecdotal, but I decided to drop the wings in this one. So we are trying the 4 Frantic Inventory. Of course, we have 4 Cryptic Serpent, 4 Tolarian Terror, and 4 Delver of Secrets as our main win cons. I also have seen some lists that run a single Murmuring Mystic main deck just to hedge against late game decks and things like that. Have one threat that if it lands, you can kind of just clean up the game pretty quickly. Or rather pretty slowly, but you'll pick up the game pretty definitively, I should say. I love a 1 of Artful Dodge and a 1 of Sleep of the Dead. They're both really good, and I feel like if you can afford the flex slots, then I really enjoy having access to both of them. This is great if your opponent has 1 or 2 blockers, or they're trying to race you, or anything like that. And Artful Dodge is great if your opponent has tons and tons of blockers, and you just need to get in for like 6 more damage or something like that. Or maybe even 12 if you're playing it from your hand. I'm also splitting the difference 1 Spell Pierce and 1 Force Spike. A lot of times I see people play 2 of one of them, but in the case that I have both of them in my hand and they're both the same, say they play a creature I really want to counter and I have 2 Spell Pierces, that sucks. Or they have 1 non-creature spell but they have 1 mana up, the Force Spike sucks. So I just like diversifying that a little bit. It's kind of just depends on what you want to do with it. You're always going to want to play 4 Thought Scour, 4 Mental Note, and 4 Brainstorm. These are the main ways that you set up your Delver of Secrets and set up your mills so that you're milling a bunch of spells to power up your Frantic Inventories, buff up your Flashback and Escape spells, and also make it so that your Terrors and other Serpents are very cheap. Couple Deep Analysis is pretty standard as well. Lorien Revealed, of course. And another one that I've seen decks go different ways on is Deem Inferior versus Boomerang. I still really like Boomerang because it's instant speed. It can bounce lands, so if they have a land that taps for multiple mana or one that they've wild growthed or anything like that, it's really good. But also I like it as another interaction piece against Broodscale combo, which the Deem Inferiors are not very good against. So I just like it for those reasons. 15 lands, and then our sideboard is 6 Blue Elemental Blast effects. I've seen some lists even running as many as 8, but I decided to just go with 6 here. 1 Dispel, another Mystic for another late game match, 2 Steel Sabotage, and 3 Annul, and a couple Bind the Monster. So this is what I'm running today. Let's jump into some games. So on the draw, round 1, and we have an okay hand. Thought Scour pumps up our graveyard a little bit. If we hit a Frantic Inventory, really good for us. Counterspell. Murmuring Mystic is not the creature we like to see in our opening hand. This is definitely a slow start. Sometimes this deck, you can get a Delver turn 1 and protect it the whole game, maybe a second Delver on turn 2, and you can win on like turn 5 or 6 really quickly, but by counterspelling everything that they play. Or sometimes you just slam 3 Terrors on turn 4 or 5. And then sometimes you have to keep an opening hand with no creatures and just dig for them, and you're just kind of spell slinging all the way. So this is definitely looking to be more one of those games, but that's okay. Our opponent starts with a Wild Growth on a Forest, so would definitely love a Boomerang. We get a Spell Pierce here, which is not bad. They Malevolent Rumble, so we're definitely going to take that Spell Pierce. It looks to be against Ponza or probably just Red-Green Monsters. Either way, they don't have a ton of targets for Spell Pierce, so being able to hit something as important and powerful as Malevolent Rumble, which ramps them and sets up their next turn, is really good value for us. So we're just going to play an island and pass here. We might counterspell something, and if not, we'll probably just Frantic Inventory. They Arbor Elf, and honestly, I don't think that's a terrible target to counterspell, especially because they didn't end up playing a land here, but I decide to hold it for, a bigger creature that they play. I decide to Frantic Inventory. I wanted to use my mana, the 2 mana instead of 2 1-drops, because these fit better into our curve. Plus, if we're able to get this Mystic out, that's going to be extra birds. I will say, playing Mental Note into Thought Scour, if we hit a single Frantic Inventory, would have been better, because then our Frantic Inventory would have drawn us an additional card. I still think it was okay the way that I did it. We get a land here, we get to leave up Counterspell, and then probably just Mental Note here anyway. They tap for 4 and play a Cruciak. I Mental Note here, because I don't totally want to counter this. It gets value from the graveyard. It's not the biggest threat, but I figure if I happen to draw another counterspell, I will spend 1 on this 4/4, which is going to be a problem anyway. And we do draw our counterspell, so we're able to just guilt-free counter the Cruciak, and they hit in for 1 with the Arbor Elf, which is exactly what we want to see happening. We're able to play the Serpent that we just top decked and then hold up a counterspell for whatever else they play. So we're looking to be in a pretty good spot here. And they tap for a large Nyxborn Hydra. We're going to counter that for sure. It makes it so that our Serpent can't get through or anything, and we don't have a lot of other ways to deal with it. And they just scoop it up right there. We were in a good spot. Maybe they didn't have anything else in hand. It seems like they easily could have played an Altasaur or something, or a Generous Ent, and kind of stopped us from attacking, but our Murmuring Mystic would have been pretty good, I will say. Sideboard here, I take out the Force Spike and the Spell Pierce. They could be really good, especially the Force Spike in the right scenario, but generally they have way too much mana. Unless I have them in the first 2 or 3 turns, they're not going to be too impactful, and I want to bring in those Bind the Monsters. This is literally red-green monsters. This is exactly what that card was made for. This hand looks totally reasonable. We have a turn 1 Delver of Secrets, so opposite of last game, we can actually maybe go on the offensive pretty early, and then we can hold up a counterspell from there. So depends on how quickly they go. They do have the Wild Growth turn 1 again, but no Arbor Elf, so we might be okay. Delver of Secrets, and we get another counterspell. They Wild Growth, play the Arbor Elf, but then they don't have anything. So whatever they're able to play here, we're going to be able to counterspell. Now if they Cascade, maybe they'll get some value through. But we also get to flip our Aberration off a Brainstorm, which was very luckily on the top. I could have Brainstormed Upkeep in order to set up the Aberration flip, which I thought about, but ultimately not the right call. I want to hold up Counterspell here because they could play a 7-drop right now, and the main way that I can deal with that is when it's on the stack. Plus, if this Aberration survives, it's going to be able to just win us the game. So they tap, untap, tap for 6 here, and they play an Avenging Hunter, and I tank a little bit here because I have a flyer that could just take the initiative and ensure that we hit a 3rd land drop, which I really don't hate. But we don't really have a good way to prevent them from taking the initiative back, and then at some point they're going to overwhelm us with that, and also we're not going to win that race, seeing as they're going to have 6 power and we're going to only have 3. So ultimately, we need to counterspell it, even though it was tempting for a moment. We do draw Lorien Revealed, so we get that island, costs us a mana, but still able to leave up Counterspell again here while we get in for 3 more damage, which is pretty nice. Pass back to them, and they once again tap for 6 mana and cast that Avenging Hunter. We're going to Counterspell it again. If we didn't want it to resolve last turn, we're not going to let it resolve this turn. And my opponent asks if we were playing 8 Counterspell main. And I told them, of course, that we pay for the premium package so that we're able to play 8 counterspells in our main deck, because why wouldn't you? Pauper's obviously just a pay-to-win format. We draw an island here, Brainstorm, put back a couple cards, and we attack for 3. We get a Bind the Monster, which is pretty good, and a Boomerang, and we decide just to Boomerang their land, and knowing that that'll probably seal their fate, and they scoop it up there. We set them back way too much mana. Most they could have here at this turn without another Wild Growth is like 3. We're pretty far ahead there. I even thought about binding the monster on their Arbor Elf, but I didn't think that was necessary. If they were able to churn out a Reacher in the next couple of turns, I would want to bind that instead. So a nice round 1. We get a pretty reasonable hand here. Brainstorm Thought Scour is one of the best combos in the deck, probably the best combo, but also in your opening hand is absolutely perfect. 2 Loriens, 2 islands, maybe a little bit high on the island count, but we can always get rid of some of them with the Brainstorm if we want, and we have a Serpent for ideally turn 3 or 4. So almost always you want to just leave up your mana, use it on their end step. You want to bluff a Spell Pierce or anything like that. They Mist Vault Bridge, so it's almost definitively Grixis Affinity. We get a lot of islands here, so I decided to put 1 island and a Lorien Revealed back, mental noting them so that we're able to get the Lorien in our graveyard for the Serpent, but not have to actually spend the mana to do it. And maybe we will cast this Lorien later if we keep drawing islands, but otherwise we are hitting our land drops for the time being. We get a Delver, which is really good. So we get to put that down a turn later than we'd want, obviously, but pretty good nonetheless. They play a Blood Fountain and don't have red mana, notably, which is really good because one of the main ways they can get us, if we happen to find a couple more Serpents, put them all down, is with the Toxin Analysis Krark Clan combo. And without red, they're not able to do that. We are going to brainstorm in our upkeep here for our Delver of Secrets. We want to make sure it flips. We didn't have a counterspell until we played the brainstorm that we knew we wanted to hold up. And even if we do draw it, which we did, we're going to be able to hold up 2 mana anyway. So we're definitely going to do that. We put back an island and a brainstorm. Of course, making sure the brainstorm's on top so it flips the aberration. And we're probably going to cycle this Tolarian so that we can get rid of the island on top. We don't really want to draw that. They play a Vault of Whispers, still no red, and they play a Familiar. I decided to counter this. I don't hate discarding a card here. It's not the end of the world, but the fact that it can also trade with the creature we have on board, the Aberration, I don't really want that to happen. Yeah, they can get it back with the Blood Fountain later, but we can at least stave that off a couple of turns. And of course, we want some spells in our graveyard for Cryptic Serpent. They Thoughtcast into Candy Trail, not too bad for us overall, and pass back to us. We're going to cycle that Tolarian in upkeep, because remember we had an island on top that we don't want. We get a Frantic Inventory, currently just a single draw, but that's okay. And I decided just to play out this Cryptic Serpent. We don't have any counter spells we're holding up. We could obviously bluff, but you don't usually want to do that. And we want to kill them as quickly as possible. It seems like they have a pretty slow start here. Maybe they start slamming Mirror Enforcers next turn. Or maybe if they find the red mana, they can Toxin a Shaman. But that's only going to kill the Serpent anyway, not the Aberration. So it's not a big deal. We still get to hold up a Thought Scour and a Brainstorm here, which is pretty good. They have the Cast Down. We don't have any interaction, so we do lose our Serpent there. And they play a Blood Fountain, pass back to us. I could not tap out here because they could have a Galvanic Blast, but I just kind of want to use my mana up. We don't have the interaction anyway, so if they're expecting a Spell Pierce, you know, they could get around it right now. But I just figure that I'd like to use my mana in this case. I think there are plenty of times where it's right to just wait. But because we have the 2 mana Frantic Inventory, which is just cycling, we kind of have a lot of stuff to do with our mana right now. And we find 2 terrors, which is phenomenal, and we get to put back that Frantic Inventory and mill it in our upkeep with our Thought Scour. You always want to mill the first one if you can, and we actually draw a second one, which is pretty good. As soon as you have 1 in the graveyard, it's pretty decent. 2 mana, draw 2 is pretty good, and obviously beyond that, it gets really, really good. They do have the Galvanic Blast. I'm kind of interested why they didn't cast it when we were tapped out. Maybe they just F6'd or something like that. But they kill our Aberration. We are able to just put down a couple Serpents here, though. Of course, running out 2, always got to worry about that Shaman Toxin combo, but we have another Terror and a draw 2 in hand, so I think it's going to be okay. They play a couple Wellsprings and a Mirror Enforcer, and we draw a Sleep of the Dead, which is honestly phenomenal. It allows us to hit for 11 here, and we have that Artful Dodge that we milled just a second ago. So next turn, they have to have removal rather than just blockers to be able to kill us. They have a Kenku Artificer, which is blockers, but again, that's not going to do it through this Artful Dodge. On the end step, we're going to Frantic Inventory, and we find a Tolarian. We're going to cycle that because we also have a Deep Analysis to play if we want to. But of course, we're just going to go for the Artful Dodge here. Do it on the Terror in case they have any way to deal with the Serpent. I made a misplay here, which was that I forgot that the bridge tapped for mana. So my thought process was, I cast Artful Dodge on the Terror, which has Ward 2, so if they have any way to kill the Terror, it's going to cost 4 mana, like a Cast Down, which obviously they'd need the mana from this. But technically, this is only 5 damage. They're at 3 with a Candy Trail on board, which can gain them 3 life. So this unblockable on the 5-power creature actually doesn't kill them. I could then Sleep of the Dead, the Mistvault Bridge, but I should have just done that first. And technically they could survive here. They could survive at 1 by tapping that. They could block the Serpent with the bridge, or even if I slept the Mistvault Bridge, they could chump with the Kenku. So I made a pretty big mistake here, honestly, that could have cost me the game if they drew pretty well there. Not to mention they just have like Blood Fountains to get back a Familiar and things like that. So I probably needed to just go for the Artful Dodge on the Serpent, knowing they only have 1 card in hand, and just hoping it's not a Cast Down, which we already saw 1 of. Usually these decks only play 2. But they conceded anyway, so we lucked out. They apparently also did not see the play on board. I knew they had a Candy Trail. I just forgot that the Mistvault could tap for mana, even though I play this deck all the time. So anyway, we got there. That's all that matters. Game 2, you want to bring in your Annulls, your Steel Sabotages, and your Dispel, since a lot of their card advantage is instant speed. We take out the Boomerangs because there's not really anything we care to bounce. So many of the things are either super cheap or have ETBs. We take out a couple Deep Analysis. This isn't one that I'm like, oh, it's bad in this matchup by any means, but I just needed something else to cut. I did cut the Artful Dodge as good as it was there, making it so we won the game, even if we didn't really win the game. I just don't think it's usually what we need. Maybe it's better than Sleep of the Dead because they have a lot of creatures sometimes, but I feel like just the 6 damage or whatever isn't super important. I don't know. I also brought in the Murmuring Mystic because these games can go quite long, and a Mystic is pretty good against all of their attackers or just going over them, especially over a Kark clan. And we took out the Force Spike and the Spell Pierce. There's a good amount of stuff that we can hit, especially with the Spell Pierce, but again, we needed something to cut, and you usually got to pull from your flex slots. I certainly can't go taking out Mental Notes and Counterspells and things like that. They're too good. They're so good here that having 5 of them in my opening hand, I'm going to mulligan, since this is obviously unplayable. And we get an okay hand here. Double Counterspell and Serpents I like to see, but just 1 Thought Scour, and we have to put one of these back isn't great. So we're going to throw back the Cryptic Serpent. We might not get to them super quickly anyway. Double Counterspell will hopefully keep us alive. Of course, Thought Scour is the only way we're getting to the Terrors. So we do top deck an island here, and they just play another Drawsforge and pass. We're going to Thought Scour, and we hit one of our 2 Mystics, so already not going great for that. And a Brainstorm. We get to just leave up a Counterspell here and the Dispel that we drew. They Blood Fountain, and I counter that. It's a tough call, I think, but Blood Fountain adds so much to their affinity count, draws them a new card when they flood, and also just obviously buys back 2 creatures later. So I think it's usually worth countering. Since we have the extra counterspells here, I was willing to do it. Plus, we do want to get a good amount of spells in our graveyard so that we can start putting down Serpents. We draw on a Null, so just Counterspell City over here, nothing wrong with that. They play another bridge, and they play a Kark clan. I think about countering it because we do have the ground creatures here, but they don't really have much else going on. And if we're able to, if they have the Toxin Analysis, we can probably just dispel it if we make sure to leave up the mana, which we will. And otherwise, they have to sack like all their lands because they don't have any expendable artifacts at the moment. So I'm okay with it. We draw Thought Scour. I just play that, seeing if we draw an island, and we do in fact, which lets us play a Cryptic Serpent here. We're tapping out of Counterspell, but I do have Dispel, and they Red Blast the Serpent, but I'm able to just dispel that very nicely. They did mulligan down to 5 here, which is why they're at so few cards. So I'm also not super worried about what they're going to play with the Counterspell this turn anyway. So we're able to get down our Serpent, start attacking for 6 ideally. They have a cast down, so that's okay. We're using a lot of their removal right now. And they ping us for 1 damage here. Pass to us, we get a Frantic Inventory. We're able to play a Terror and hold up 2 counterspells again. They have another Red Blast, not a bad 5 card hand that they had, but we have the Counterspell luckily, so we're able to start getting this Terror online. And we have an Annul for the first artifact that they play here. They Reckoner's Bargain, one of their lands, so can't counter that. They do draw a couple cards, but obviously set back on their land count. We get a Brainstorm. We're going to put back inventory and one of our Annuls, but we have a Lorien revealed and a Counterspell. Don't really want to cycle this Lorien yet because I actually like getting an Annul and another Frantic Inventory. And they Thoughtcast on 2 cards here where we have a win con. I just want to keep them off of cards, so we're going to Counterspell that. And then they Mirror Enforcer, and we of course have the Annul for that as well. So able to just keep them off of all of their stuff. They ping in for 1 damage again. We're going to be swinging back for a hefty 5 damage. And just draw that Annul again. The main things that I'm worried about them drawing are artifacts. A Mirror Enforcer would allow them to trade, Refurbished Familiar, draw some cards, stuff like that. They just have a land and play it here, so we draw that Frantic Inventory. I will say I misstacked my Brainstorm. I should have had the Frantic Inventory the other way so that I could have cast it the turn earlier and then drawn into the Annul if I needed it. I would have saved 2 mana this turn, which would have been a little better. It doesn't end up mattering. We get another Terror, but I don't want to run it out. This 1 Terror is just doing all the work we need to. And in the case that they top deck Toxin, I don't want to get caught with my Terrors down. Kind of a pants down kind of thing. I'll attack with the Terror here. They have to chump. And I still decide not to run out this Terror just in case they happen to top deck. And there's tons of card draw in this deck. They could easily find a way to do it. Of course, if they find just a removal spell, they might be able to kill the Terror and survive another turn or 2, but I think it's okay. They do Deadly Dispute into Thoughtcast and then find the Red Blast, and we don't have the Counterspell, so they are able to survive another turn here. But I can potentially just go Lorien into Terror if I want to, and we draw Steel Sabotage, decide that it's better to leave up double Counterspell than go for the Lorien, the greedier play. And they Deadly Dispute here. Can't counter that, but that's okay. They have a Mirror Enforcer, that's a chump blocker, so we counter that, and they scoop it up. We had just the answer for everything, and of course their Mold of 5 did not help them either. Round 3 here against Crazy Willy. 2 terrors, 3 islands, Mental Note, Spell Pierce is honestly pretty good. It looks very nice. If we can get the terrors down quickly, that'll be fantastic. So we're going to keep this one for sure. Opponent plays Mountain Voldaren, so it looks like Kuldotha Red. We get a Counterspell, and they prepare yourself. They Cathartic Reunion, discarding Sneaky Snacker, Scrapwork Mutt, not what I was expecting, and we have the Spell Pierce. I know they wanted those cards in their graveyard, but I just Spell Pierced to prevent Ancestral. No, you cannot draw 3 cards. This was the best high of my life. Absolutely phenomenal. Also, clearly not Kuldotha. They're doing some weird mono Red Dredge kind of a thing. But absolutely amazing. And I didn't even care what happened beyond that. We did take a damage here, and I get to just hold up Counterspell, see if they want to go for it again. They just play a Voldaren Epicure here. Don't really want to counter that. So we will just take the damage, and they make another blood. So take a damage, they attack with the first Epicure. We're going to Mental Note. We get a Lorien, so we're going to cycle that. We also hit a Frantic Inventory and a Counterspell off of that, so we're already at 5 spells here. Not bad at all. And we draw another Terror, so we are able to play that. These cost 2 right now. I want to just hold up the Counterspell. I don't want to run out 1 Terror for 2 mana, but now I'm kind of okay with countering anything and then just slamming 3 terrors. I feel like this mono red deck is not going to have a very good job of dealing with that. They also cracked a blood to discard a Cathartic Reunion, and they throw out another Epicure. Not usually a card I would care about countering, but again, we just want to get these terrors down next turn, so I'm going to do it. They have an Insolent Neonate, which is totally fine. Not a card I'm too worried about. And we get to another island. We are getting a little flooded, but I'm okay with it when Serpents ride the waves to victory. So they discard a Lotless Troll and nothing else. We attack for 15, and we have a Sleep of the Dead. I decide to sleep 2 of their creatures now in order to... They don't untap next turn, so they're not going to be able to block next turn either. So we can sleep a couple now, and then also sleep 1 or 2 next turn, and we get to use some of our mana now. And only one of these terrors needs to get through to be able to win the game. So I think this is all right. They do have to have 3 blockers here to be able to survive. Plus we have the Sleep of the Dead at least once more from our graveyard. So they need 4 blockers really. They Cathartic Reunion, a Lotleth Troll, and a Basking Rootwalla, which they get for free. They get the Snacker back, and then they crack their Neonate, which was one of their blockers, trying to dig for something else. They have a Dread Return here, which they could even use to return the Lotleth Giant, but they don't have enough blockers, and they don't have enough to kill us, so they end up scooping it up. Until they downshift Soul Guide Lantern, we have no graveyard hate in our mono blue deck that cares about the graveyard, because we don't want to run Relic, obviously. So we do luckily have 6 Hydroblast effects that we're able to bring in. We take all of those in, and we take out Boomerangs, don't seem very good. We take out Deep Analysis, doesn't seem great. Mirroring Mystic, we're going to want to not go that late. And Sleep of the Dead was good there, but ultimately I don't think is right for what we need here. So we have a lot of counterspells in the deck now with all of those, but we don't have any graveyard hate. So if they're able to just fill their graveyard, we may be in for a tough game. We get a pretty good hand here. Delver turn 1, Lorien into whatever. They Faithless Looting 2 Stinkweed Imps. Here's the Dredge coming up. They of course Dredge, and then they Cathartic Reunion, discard the Stinkweed Imp, Dredge twice, and they instantly have an enormous graveyard. Like I said, that was the main problem we're going to have. We get another Counterspell, unfortunately no land, so we have to cycle this Lorien, which means we can't even hold up Counterspell this next turn. They could finish us off pretty quickly here. Good news is we at least flipped our Delver. So really the only thing to do is cycle Lorien, play a second Delver, and try to win as fast as possible. Because they already have 9 creatures in their graveyard on turn 2. They unearth a Molten Gatekeeper and a Scrapwork Mutt, pinging for 1, discard the Stinkweed Imp, bring it back, attack for 4. And they pass to us, exile both their guys. We don't flip Delver, but we draw an island, so I'm okay with that. We get to just hold up our counterspells this time. We get to hit them back for 4, down to 13, and just brace for impact here. They play a mountain, and they cast a Faithless Looting, hard cast. I decide I don't think it's worth countering. They didn't have Snackers in the graveyard, and I don't really anticipate a lot of madness, so it's totally fine. They didn't even have a Stinkweed Imp in there, so they been a Stinkweed Imp and a Sneaky Snacker, but ultimately not a big deal for us at all. Great to see them doing very little with their turn. We get a Mental Note into a Brainstorm into our Thought Scour, so we're able to just fill the yard with Frantic Inventory and a bunch of stuff. Draw a Cryptic Serpent, we get a Hydroblast, which we reveal to them with the Aberration. So we're attacking for 6 here, putting them down to 7. And then we have a very tough question. Do I run out a Cryptic Serpent in order to have lethal on them next turn, or do I hold up 2 counterspells instead of just 1? Because they need something next turn, or they're probably going to die anyway. But they've got 12 creatures in the graveyard. They have Faithless, Stinkweed Imp, Sneaky Snacker. They have a Lotless Giant. They have a Dread Return. They pretty much have all the pieces they need. So if they have Red Blasts to counter our Counterspell, we're going to be in a rough spot. And I, maybe incorrectly, I go for the greedy play, and I play a Cryptic Serpent, trying to make sure we win this next turn. They dredge their Stinkweed Imp, hitting another Snacker, and they Molten Gatekeeper from Grave. So they currently are at 12 creatures in graveyard, okay? They have a Dread Return, they have a Lotless Giant, they Faithless Looting, and they have 2 Sneaky Snackers in their graveyard. So if looting goes off, Snackers come back, ping us for 2 because of this Gatekeeper. They then have 10 creatures in grave, but they have 3 creatures. They're able to sack them all to Dread Return, ping us for 12 off the Lotless Giant. Remember, we already took 2 off the Gatekeeper, so that means we're at 1 life. But if this Faithless Looting is able to discard a single creature, then that would be an additional damage from the Lotless Giant. So I have to counterspell this, is what I decide. It's almost definitively going to kill us. If they have the Pyroblast, which I assume they will probably be able to win, or if they just have another Faithless Looting in hand. So we Hydroblast because the mana difference doesn't really matter here, and that's the one they know about. Maybe I should have just counterspelled because we could top deck a 1-drop or something that would matter, but they unearth another Gatekeeper and they concede. So they didn't have the Faithless, they didn't have the Pyroblast. Was it correct in going for the risky play there of the Cryptic Serpent? I don't know, but it obviously ended up paying off. So we're currently 6-0 going into round 4. Round 4 here, we get a Stinker for our first hand. We're going to mulligan that. And then we get 2 lands, 2 Lorians, Frantic, Deep Analysis, Terror. Not great. A lot of expensive card draw, 1 Terror, and some Lorien Revealeds. But we have our land drops. We have a Frantic Inventory to dig a little bit. I think we're going to keep it. We put back 1 Lorien Revealed. I realize I probably should have just put back an island because we can pull out islands with the Lorien Revealeds, and then they fill our Terror up a little bit better. But maybe this fits into our curve better. They play a Manor Gate on black, and I assume we're against Fog, which is not my favorite. So we'll see what they do. We cycle that Lorien and just hold up Counterspell because we don't really have anything else to do. They play a Swamp into an Ichor Wellspring, which is interesting, not usually something I see out of Fog a lot. We Frantic Inventory for another Terror, find an island, and unfortunately just pass again. We have a Counterspell, but nothing else. They go for another Wellspring, so I'm thinking maybe it's not Fog, because they also Twisted Landscape. So I'm thinking it might just be Jund whatever. There's 17 million Jund decks right now. We draw a Delver of Secrets, pretty awkwardly timed, so we just Deep Analysis here. If they do anything weird here, it'd be pretty annoying, especially if they happen to be like combo Broodscale. But the way our curves played out, I think we just kind of need to Deep Analysis. Next turn, we can hold up Counterspell, play a Delver, and a Mental Note, which will be pretty good. Then Malevolent Rumble, and the jig is up. They are, in fact, Broodscale. They take the Nadir's Nightblade, pass to us. We get a Lorien, so we're able to play this Delver. I will say, not that Glee's my favorite. This deck's decent against Glee because we have a lot of counterspells. Probably a better matchup than Turbo Fog would have been because we are all about the combat damage, although obviously we have counterspells for Fogs as well, so maybe we can get there. So for once, I'm not too upset about seeing a Glee matchup. They crack their landscape for a forest. They just play a swamp and pass back to us. We're going to Mental Note here. Mill a couple, we get a Thought Scour, let's play that too. Make sure these terrors are nice and cheap. We even get a Cryptic Serpent. We're just going to cycle the Lorien. We're probably never tapping out for 5 mana against a Broodscale opponent until we have like 7 or 8 lands. So let's just get our land while we can. While we don't have Counterspell mana, they decide to Deadly Dispute, crack their landscape, and then Eviscerator's Insight their Ichor Wellspring. which is fine to me because they had to discard 4 cards after all that, so they didn't even keep a lot of their advantage. It was a lot more like looting at the end of the day. They discarded a Colony Garden, Shambling Ghast, Makeshift Munitions, and a Malevolent Rumble. So some real cards that I'm not too upset seeing go. We get another Counterspell, which is pretty good here. So we're going to be able to, and we flip our Delver off of that. So we're just going to play 2 Terrors and hold up double Counterspell in case they have the combo. We obviously want that. They play a Writhing Chrysalis. Since they already have 1 spawn here, Chrysalis could get big enough to eat Terrors, so I think I have to Counterspell it. Obviously, we want to stop the combo above all else, but we also need to be able to kill them to do that, and so I think we have to counter that Chrysalis, not that I like to. They have a Broodscale. We let that through. I'd rather counter the Sadistic Glee, but we'll see how that works out for us. We get another Terror, and I'm going to Deep Analysis, see if we can draw any more interaction. We get a Sleep of the Dead, which is okay. I'm just going to attack, force some Eldrazi spawn chumps here, which we do get, and they go for an Eviscerator's Insight on the 1. And we're going to play a Terror and a Cryptic Serpent and hold up our Counterspell. I decide that we only have 1 Counterspell, so we're going to die to a double Sadistic Glee or whatever anyway. We might as well run out all of our creatures and have as best of a chance to win next turn as possible. They go for the Glee on the Broodscale, and we counter it. Now, I know they have the Nadir's Nightblade. I could just wait and counter the Nadir's Nightblade, which I don't think is always a wrong idea. But first of all, we know they have a Nightblade. It's possible they have a second, even though the deck only runs, a couple win cons usually. But also just an infinite-sized Broodscale is going to eat one of our Terrors, make another spawn. We're not going to be able to attack now because they have chump blockers. I just don't really think there's a way we win there. So we counter the Sadistically. They Deadly Dispute their spawn, so they don't have the backup. And then they go for a Chrysalis, which is annoying, but it's not big enough to eat any of our Terrors right now. So maybe we're okay. Plus we have this Sleep of the Dead. We have an island, and we can cast Sleep 3 times total. If they don't have a Tamiyo Safekeeping, we can kill them here. Because we can tap down 3 creatures. They can at best block a Cryptic Serpent, and they're taking 18. Whereas if they have a Tamiyo Safekeeping, not only do they gain 2 life, but they're going to be able to keep one of their creatures untapped. So we don't have anything else to play, so we might as well just go for it. Sleep of the Dead, their Chrysalis, which they let resolve. We sleep the Broodscale, and they do safekeeping that. Okay, fair enough. And we tap down a Eldrazi spawn. Seeing as we know they have the Nadir's Nightblade, there's no reason for me to leave back a chump blocker here in case they get the combo and are able to have an infinite power attacker, because they're going to win with the Nadirs either way. So I decide just to attack with every single creature. They do have a free block here, and they chump with the spawn. They only go down to 3, but if they don't have anything, we'll be able to win next turn. So a bit risky, but we didn't really have a better play. And they spend 5 mana to Eviscerator's Insight their Chrysalis. Malevolent Rumble, they find the Glee, but they don't have any colored mana beyond that. If they had sacked their spawn for the mana for the Rumble, and found the Glee, played that on there, they could have had an infinite colorless. I don't know if they would have had a way to turn that into a black for the Nadirs, but I think they made a mistake there not sacking the Eldrazi spawn. So we're actually able to take that first game. I take out the Murmuring Mystic, Force Spike, Spell Pierce, and a Deep Analysis, and we bring in the 3 Annuls and the Dispel for their card draw, and obviously for their Sadistically. Otherwise, we don't really have great cards. We could bring in Bind the Monster, which is decent against Chrysalis, but it doesn't do much against Broodscale unless they don't have an outlet. It still gives them infinite mana. And obviously, we can't play this on a Broodscale that they've already comboed with because we would take infinite damage. So we just go for those 4 swaps. This hand's okay. We get a turn 1 Delver, but we really need to find a second land. I think it's keepable, but it's tough. We decide to go for it. They Colony Garden, and we get another Frantic Inventory. That's not bad. We can mental note Frantic Inventories. So we go for the upkeep Brainstorm. This is risky. We want to flip the Delver, but we are digging for 1 fewer card by brainstorming in our upkeep, because we dig 3, put back 2 cards, and then dig 1, but we've already seen that card, right? So only 3 total. Whereas if we draw our card for the turn and then dig 3, we'll have dug 4. So to find the land, it would have been better to brainstorm after. I'm trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here, get our land, and get a spell on top. I'm being quite greedy, I will admit. They go for an Eviscerator's Insight in response, making it so we can't Spell Pierce. Luckily, we find the island. We're able to put back both Frantic Inventories here, And we do draw one since that was in our upkeep. Totally fine. I just wanted to have one of them on top that I could mill with the Mental Note. That was another downside, I will say, to doing it in our upkeep. But the upside was attacking for 3. They have the Snuff out, so it doesn't really matter either way. They play a Shambling Ghast and just pass back to us. So we get to Mental Note, bin that Frantic Inventory, cycle a Tolarian. We're amassing Serpents here, so we're just going to play one out. We have a turn 3 6/5, seems pretty good. They're going to sack their Shambling Ghast to an Eviscerator's Insight. I will say, I know that they could have the combo right here. I could have held up the Counterspell, the Annul, and I'm just chancing it. They've drawn a few cards, but they haven't dug with the Malevolent Rumble or anything like that. I'm hoping that they don't just have the combo in the top, 13 cards of their deck. But this is definitely a risky play, another risky play that I have taken here, and we'll see what happens. They play the Broodscale, and they play the Sadistic Glee. Even though we were tapped out, they don't combo there, which I think is a little weird. Now, I understand they're probably holding up Tamio's Safekeeping, but say we have a Spell Pierce and a Boomerang here. We can Boomerang the Broodscale, they Tamios, we Spell Pierce, and then we're able to get them. Maybe if they have another Glee in hand, it's not a big deal. But seeing as we were tapped out, I think they should have just gone for it. I will say without a Boomerang, we're kind of out of luck here, so now we're just digging for it. We Tolarian into a Brainstorm. We hit nothing really. So we're just going to play down a Tolarian Terror and hold up some cards, even though they don't really matter at this point. They adapt, and we don't have a response to it. We just let them combo here, and they just play the Nadir's Nightblade, and we are dead, unfortunately. So we took a risk trying to get out that turn 3 Terror. It didn't pay off. They were able to have the combo really early. In retrospect, I should have played it a little safer. Should have held up the Annul and the Brainstorm and gone for a Terror the next turn, probably. Round 3 here. This is one of those hands that we don't have any creatures, so we don't really have a game plan except for dig for creatures. But we do have some nice interaction, Annul and Counterspell, and some nice ways to dig. So we're going to keep this one, even if it doesn't look amazing. As long as you have lands and spells in this deck, usually you can keep it. They play a landscape, so we get to Mental Note, and we mill Cryptic Serpent, just about the worst you can do. The only worst would be 2 Terrors. We play an island and hold up our Counterspell. They just play a land, so we're going to Thought Scour and get another island. We're just holding up Counterspell until they do something, or we Frantic Inventory or whatever. They play a Broodscale, and I just go for the Counterspell here. I don't want to be forced into holding it up next turn. It's possible with this Annul in hand, I should have just let them have it. But the way they just nonchalantly cast it on turn 3 just left a sour taste in my mouth. Maybe it means they have more Broodscales, maybe whatever. Maybe it means they don't have anything else going on. I get a Dispel, which is not too bad. We're going to Frantic Inventory here just to see if we get a Terror or anything like that, because we'd be able to cast it. We don't. We get an island. And they have a Chrysalis. We don't really have an answer to that, unfortunately. Another island for us. We're getting flooded and cannot afford to tap out here with the Tolarian revealed. At the very least, we'll tap out next turn and hold up an Annul and a Dispel. But that's only if we're desperate, although we're desperate if we draw just an island next turn. They attack, go for a Deadly Dispute here, and we Dispel. That's exactly what Dispel is for. So we're able to keep them off a couple cards, and they have a Wellspring, which we're not going to Annul by any means. Not what Annul is here for. We get a Brainstorm. So Brainstorm could be a whiff, so I just want to go for the Tolarian revealed. Draw 3 cards here, hold up the Annul. If Brainstorm hit like a Terror and a Counterspell, that would have been amazing. But we see it would have hit Sleep of the Dead, a Mental Note, not a big deal. Annul's the only thing that really matters here anyway. They Insight the Wellspring, drawing a bunch. They have a Shambling Ghast and another Wellspring. Not a big deal for us. Pretty good turn for us, since they're not really doing anything. They attack for 3 more. And we're going to Brainstorm on the end step, Mental Note on the upkeep. We find a Terror. We put back our Sleep of the Dead, as well as our Mental Note. We get another Frantic Inventory. That's going to start drawing us 2, and we have a Terror here. So we're going to put that down. Now we just have a couple interactions pieces and some card draw. They snuff out. I could Boomerang my Terror, and I think about it, but I decide against it. I have a lot of card draw here with Frantic Inventory Tolarian. Probably be able to find another one, and I want to hold up this Boomerang in case they go for the combo. So let's Frantic here on the end step, draw 2 cards. We find a Brainstorm, so let's cast that. We have a Tolarian to shuffle if we want to, and we don't. We decide just to put back a couple cards, and I'm happy to pick one of them up. It's the Annul. which I want to keep. I shuffle away the Artful Dodge because I don't really need it right now. Could be good later, but that's okay. We're going to brainstorm, trying to find another threat. I'd love to put down 2 terrors here, but we just put down the 1. We do find another Frantic Inventory, though, which is now a 2-mana draw 3. Pretty good. And another Counterspell. So now our hand is looking pretty stacked, which is a good sign for us. Of course, they Insight, a Wellspring, crack some landscapes, draw some cards, play a Manor Gate, and they pay 4 mana to snuff out our terror and then pay for the ward. 6 mana uses their entire turn. We're going to counterspell this one. We don't want them to keep hitting us, and we would like to start cracking them back. But them spending 6 mana to waste their turn, essentially, trade 1 for 1, is pretty good for us. We also get to inventory, draw those 3 cards now. We get a mental note even. And we keep the mental note in case we get a brainstorm and we want to, bin a deep analysis or an artful dodge or anything like that. We don't really need to throw it out right there. So it's totally fine. We're going to attack for 5. We know they're probably just going to chump block with the Shambling Ghast, but we got to get through some chump blockers here and at some point start hitting them. I'm going to cycle a Tolarian. We have plenty of cards. I really don't need to cast them all anymore. So we're going to cycle them. I'm also going to Sleep of the Dead this Chrysalis, make it so it can't block or attack. I don't want to keep taking damage, especially if they get a couple more tokens here, like a couple more spawn here, which they do with the Chrysalis. I don't want to take 6 damage off this Chrysalis, and I don't want to have to bounce it either, because that would just give them more value. So they play another Chrysalis. I think I have to counterspell it. Again, it's going to be too big for the terror. This first one's going to be pretty big for it. I can also probably afford to sleep 1 Chrysalis every single turn. I can't really afford to do it twice because we're going to run out of graveyard and we're going to run out of mana. So I gotta get rid of that one, I think. I get a brainstorm. We're looking low on cards in library, 20-ish, but not too low. I definitely took a peek at what cards were left in my deck when I cycled that Less Lorien Revealed. To my surprise, there were 8 threats left, and then a bunch of card draw and lands. Which is basically what the entire deck is. So, not a ton of counterspells left. We've used a good number of them, I will say. We brainstorm though when we find a Delver, which could be pretty good. With this Writhing Chrysalis locked down, this could be a nice 3 damage every turn. And we also set up the top of our deck with a brainstorm. I'm pretty sure we put a spell on top so that this Delver will flip next turn for sure. They chump with a Spawn and then Deadly Dispute it for the terror. We Thought Scour ourselves. We had actually put back a Deep Analysis and a Mental Note. I don't know if I needed to do that. Certainly not there. I will say this actually makes it so that my Delver won't definitively flip next turn, and that's kind of what I should be playing for. So I don't think I should have Thought Scoured there. And honestly, hard casting a Deep Analysis wouldn't have been the worst thing ever. But we do get to cast it here, draw 2, which is not bad. And we find both a Terror and another Delver of Secrets. So maybe I made the right play and I just didn't know it. But is having 2 Delvers we don't know are going to flip better than one that we do know? I don't know. In any case, we get to keep tapping this down for now and, start cracking in for a ton. We still have 2 pieces of interaction if they find the combo, but instead they just Eviscerator's Insight, drawing more cards. They find a Duress, which is not bad. They take the Boomerang, and I'm worried they're going to combo here, but they pass through combat, don't attack, and Duress us again. They take Tolarian Revealed, which was going to be pretty good here. We still have the Annul, which is nice if they go for a combo. They Writhing Chrysalis is a 5/6, but we can tap that down. They go for a Snuff Out with one of our Aberrations flipping, and we reveal a Frantic Inventory, the 4th one in our deck, meaning this is now a 2-mana draw 4, the absolute best card we could have drawn. So they did kill one of our Aberrations, but that's okay. We get to draw a million here. We start Thought Scouring them because we only have 10 cards left in our library. We don't want to mill out. Draw another card. And we get a Counterspell, which is definitely what we were looking for, is just some more interaction here. We're going to sleep that Writhing Chrysalis, exiling creatures and lands first if you can. Attack with the team. We get to put them all the way down to 3 and then pass with 2 Annuls and a Counterspell up. So even if they've found the combo, we have triple protection. Ideally, this will keep us alive. They play Colony Garden, sack it to the Insight right away, and have a Last Rites, which is, if you haven't seen this one, discard any number of cards. Target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card for each card discarded. That player discards those cards. So they don't know how many non-land cards we have. They could theoretically discard 4 cards, make us discard our entire hand, and then they could still have the combo, potentially. Not what I was expecting, and absolutely would be brutal, so we have to counterspell this. It's pretty good bait if that's what they were doing. And then they have a second one, and we don't have a counterspell for that, so we just have to let them do it, but they're tapped so low on mana, they're not necessarily going to be able to actually combo now. And they also only discard a Tamiyo's Safekeeping, only one card, so they take one to null, but we actually have a second one. I don't really know why you would cast the Last Rites if you weren't going to do at least 2 or 3. It was a 3 mana, 2 card Thoughtseize. But in any case, they have a Shambling Ghast here, and they're going to pass to us. Now, it looks like we have lethal on them right now, but if they have a Tamiyo's Safekeeping, then we're going to not have lethal with the Aberration. So we definitely want to use the Sleep of the Dead to try to tap down their 2 creatures to hit in for a little bit of extra damage, just to make sure it's going to go through. So we cast that on the Shambling Ghast, exiling. I think we have to do some spells now because we've gotten rid of all of our creatures and lands. And they do have the Tamiyo's Safekeeping, but that doesn't even keep them alive this time, because they only gain 2 life and have 1 extra blocker, so they can block a terror and still take 8 as long as they don't have anything for this second one. We Sleep of the Dead their spawn, and they scoop it up, and we're able to get there against Broodscale. Round 5 here, we get a bad hand, so we got to throw that one back. This one's not great, but for a 6, we're definitely not getting rid of it, so we're going to put back an island. We do have the Mental Note Brainstorm combo, which is amazing. I just would like maybe a counterspell or something along the way. Valdarn Epic here. Usually I would think Kuldotha Red. Now I'm thinking maybe it could be this weird Red Dredge deck, which I was not anticipating worrying about. We Brainstorm on their turn. They pass to us. We could Mental Note in our upkeep if we wanted, but we put back a spell and then a land so that we could play out our Delver of Secrets, and then the following turn it would flip. So I don't want to Mental Note and make the mistake I made last game where I didn't flip it when I could. I want to make sure it flips this time. So we're going to Mental Note next turn, probably. They attack with both of these guys. We got to take it. We know we're going to flip the Delver off this Thought Scour and then play our island and just pass. We cannot race them. They already have 3 damage, even with just 1 land, and they play a Goblin Tomb Raider, another one, which is pretty good. For 1 land, pretty good start for them. We're going to counterspell this. Tomb Raider is a pretty good card. We're going to Mental Note first, see if we hit anything. We do draw a Frantic Inventory and bin a Frantic Inventory, which is not bad at all. Definitely how you want to see it. And they don't attack with the Epic here. We trade our Delver for their Tomb Raider. I just need to stave off damage as much as possible. Get this Cryptic Serpent down, ideally. We Thought Scour. We already have 4 spells in our grave, so Thought Scour is going to make it so our Serpent costs just the 2. And we get that down pretty quickly. They play a Blast Runner and a Percussionist here and got a pass to us. We get a Boomerang, which is okay. I want to attack with the Serpent, but we're down 4 life already. Not a ton. But they have a blood token. They get in with the Blast Runner. Our Delver can't hold off anything, so it's just a lot of damage we're going to be taking. We might as well sit back. We have this Boomerang. They Kuldotha Rebirth. We don't have the Counterspell, which is really, really frustrating because we haven't even expended a Counterspell yet. We did mill one, but... and then, of course, they have the Bushwhacker. So, not great. They swing with the whole lot, and we're able to block 2 of them and bounce the Blast Runner, preventing that 4 damage, which is nice, but we still take 8 here. I could have bounced a token, but I think the Blast Runner was the right choice there. We do get a Terror, which is okay. Thought Scour to see if we draw anything. We play the Terror, and I decide I think I have to attack with the Cryptic Serpent here. My only win con is if they just have nothing really in their hand except for that Blast Runner we know about, and we're able to just beat in a couple times here. I don't really know, but not attacking does not seem like a winning strategy. So we attack for 6. They swing with the team. We get to eat a Goblin, but we're taking 3 ultimately, so 2 burn spells is going to finish us off. They Galvanic Blast for 2 and then Chain Lightning for 3. From our sideboard, we get 6 Hydroblast effects, as well as a Dispel. And we take out the Murmuring Mystic, because we're not planning to go long. All 4 of the Frantic Inventories, because, again, those are more late-game cards. The Deep Analyses, which are not very good because they lose us life. And I inadvertently took out the Sleep of the Dead for a Steel Sabotage. I did not mean to do that. I don't really think the Sleep is very good in this matchup either, but I do think it's better than a Steel Sabotage unless we get really lucky. So, not intentional, just an accident. And this hand is not very good, but it doesn't feel like something we can throw back. Boomerangs are another card I wanted to take out because they don't do very much. Bouncing 1 spell here does not really do us much good at all. But the problem with the Frantic Inventories is you have to play all or none of them, right? I can't just play 2 of them because then they're just absolutely terrible. To get all the cards I wanted in, I had to cut all 4 of them, and then I was left with these boomerangs that I don't think are great. In any case, we're going to keep this one and hope we mill really well and then get down like a turn 2 Terror. I don't think is possible. A turn 3 Terror could be good. And they start with the Relic of Progenitus, which, to be honest, most of the time I see Mono Red bring in a Relic of Progenitus, I'm happy. It just means that they don't kill us as quickly. This is the deck where that is not the case. I need my graveyard unless I have Delvers really early, and in this case, I do not. So we decide to sandbag our Thought Scour a little bit since we don't want to... we want to bunch up all of our milling as much as possible so that they have to pop the Relic and can't just, eat it one at a time. So I just wait a little bit on that. They Percussionist, and I don't counterspell that because is it really worth counterspelling? And then I counterspell this Chain Lightning because I don't want to waste all of our mana. It was probably not worth it. I probably should have counterspelled the Clockwork or not counterspelled anything at all, but I don't want to have to hold up the mana every single turn, but I guess I'm holding up the mana anyway because of this Relic. It's a tough spot. We play our island and we just pass because we can't get any terrors down. We have a Boomerang and a Thought Scour, which is not really going to keep us alive too well. They Kuldotha Rebirth, and again, we don't have a counterspell. I could have Thought Scoured in response to try to find the counterspell, and I thought about it, but that just opens them up to relicking us earlier than I want, and I think the only way we can have a shot here is by getting a terror down that they cannot kill. So I cycle this Lorien, they do go for the Relic to tap, and I Boomerang a token. And then I have a Force Spike here. I Thought Scour, just hoping I hit 2 spells because then I'd be able to play one of these guys. And I hit a Counterspell, of course, and an Island. So we're not able to play a Terror because they cost 4. All we can do is run out a Delver of Secrets and hold up this Force Spike, which could be okay. They do only have 2 lands, but could also just be terrible. They Relic us, and of course we get rid of our Island. And I think I have to keep this Delver around a little bit, hope that it turns into a 3-2 and can start blocking X1s. They play a Blast Runner, and I don't have a Force Spike target here. We flip with a Mental Note, and I go for it, seeing if I can get a Terror down here. They don't crack in response or anything, and we mill 2 spells, so I'm actually able to play a 1-mana Terror. They have the Pyroblast for it, though. I can't Force Spike it, and so I just go for a Cryptic Serpent, sadly, which, maybe can hold down the fort, but who knows. And they crack the Relic, make it so no more Serpents are coming out, have a Tomb Raider, and they have a Kuldotha Rebirth. So they're able to attack with the whole team. We get to eat a Tomb Raider and a Goblin here and take 5, which isn't terrible when they're at 1, but they have a lot of creatures here. We have a Brainstorm, so we cast that, just fine, not great stuff. I kept a Brainstorm, and I probably just should have kept the Mental Note and milled to those cards to find something new. So that was a bit of a mistake. They Experimental Synth into a Reckless Abandon, which they cast right away, stacking their Clockwork, and I get to Force Spike something finally. It was 4 damage, so it was relevant. And they don't attack here. The reason that I put the Mental Note on top was to flip the Delver, so there was a reason I did it. I'm not sure if it was better to just go for the digging for a Counterspell or a Red Blast or something, a Blue Blast. We do get a Terror here, and I decide, once again, gotta race. They have 1 card in hand, 1 card they're gonna draw. They have 5 damage on board, but we get to put down this Terror. They don't have a sack effect unless they get a land here, in which case they have to sack the Synth, and they have to waste value unless they have a Kuldotha, blah, 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 blah. We attack for 12, and they take it, so instantly they're below us, and we do have a Terror to put down. And then I remember that they had exiled my graveyard, and my Terror costs more than 1 mana, which I was thinking it cost a single mana, and I'd be able to hold up the Mental Note. So I Mental Note, I'm lucky enough to hit 1 spell, but Terror actually costs 2. I have a Spell Pierce, and I decide to go for the Terror, which is what my original plan was, rather than holding up the Spell Pierce. I die to a Bushwhacker either way here, but this way I die to more like burn spells. Like I die to 2 Lightning Bolts here, so I don't know if I don't think it was right to play out the Terror. I probably should have just held up the Spell Pierce. They do have a Pyroblast, so that would have been nice to Spell Pierce, and they have a Clockwork Percussionist. But I will say they can't attack with their whole team. They think about it for a second, but they have to hold back 2 blockers because they're at 8. And so they hold back 2 blockers just in case I have a way to get rid of one of them. So we only have 6 damage in the air. I'd have to find Sleep of the Dead would be a really good draw because I could tap down both their guys. We draw an island, so I have to swing for 6 in the air and hope they don't have anything that the Spell Pierce can't deal with. I could have swung with just 1 Aberration, which might have been the play, but if I block with it and it then dies, then I don't have the clock to kill them next turn still. So like if they had a Bushwhacker here, but I'm dead to a Bushwhacker either way, so that probably wouldn't have been made a lot of sense. I think I maybe should have attacked with only one, but if they have like a Galvanic Blast to kill one, then I have 2 more turns to kill them. So again, I'm realizing through all this discussion that I'm prone to trying to win next turn if I can. And I think sometimes that's right to just go for it and trying to make sure they don't have it. But sometimes that's wrong, and I probably need to discern a little bit better when those opportunities are that I should go for it and when I should not. In any case, they swing with the whole team. They don't have much other choice. We get to block the Blast Runner. It's their best creature, and obviously we don't want to kill the Clockwork and give them an extra card draw. And they go for a Chain Lightning. We have the Spell Pierce, so as long as they don't have another Bolt, we're good. And they Galvanic Blast us, but they only have 2 artifacts. So we draw the Blue Blast, but we are able to kill them there. Just barely, we are at 1. I realized I couldn't have drawn a Sleep of the Dead that last game because I had mistakenly sided it out. I corrected that change, took out the Steel Sabotage, put back in the Sleep. Again, it's not an amazing card in this matchup, but it is better than a Steel Sabotage. This hand is okay. Boomerang is not great, as discussed. Spell Pierce is pretty good, especially early. We have the Brainstorm. We are not on the play, though, so we cannot take out a turn 1 spell, but maybe we can get a turn 2 spell or something. They do have that Relic once again, the type of spell I would have loved to Spell Pierce, but I was not able to. They have a Tomb Raider, swinging for 2 right out the gate, and we are going to Brainstorm here. Of course, they get to eat it with their Relic. Once again, we set up our cards so that we had a spell and then a land. We draw our land, and then we're going to flip our Boomerang, I believe it was, off of this Delver to be able to transform it. So we don't want to mental note that away. We do have a Spell Pierce in case they cast something here, although they'd have to cast a creature first or 2 spells or whatever. They don't cast anything at all, and we're able to flip off the Delver. Because I don't like Boomerang very much in this matchup, I should have then mental noted. So you flip the Delver off of the Boomerang, and then you mental note to mill the Boomerang. Would have been far better, but alas, I missed that this time. I do just sit back. They've already dealt us 4 damage with this Tomb Raider, so we just gotta trade. They, once again, 3rd game in a row, have a Kuldotha Rebirth where we don't have a Counterspell, which is getting on my nerves. And we have a Spell Pierce, but that doesn't counter a Bushwhacker, so we are definitely looking to die here. We get to trade for the Tomb Raider and bounce a Goblin token and take 6 down to 10. They Relic away, nothing relevant. All we can do is play out a Terror, and for all of our mana, we can't even hold up a Spell Pierce, and they have the Red Blast for it, which is brutal. My alternative was just hold up Spell Pierce and take 3 more damage. Maybe that would have been better, but we didn't have much else going on. And they have a Bushwhacker either way. We were not going to be able to stop that. We're at 2 here, and we draw another Lorien Revealed. And unfortunately, we do not get the trophy that we so desire. So we got a nice 4-1. Not bad at all, especially since I haven't picked up this deck in like a couple of months. I will say the Frantic Inventories felt pretty good, especially that game we were able to draw 4 off of it was insane. We didn't get down to Mystic at all, so I can't really judge that. The Boomerang was amazing in that game against Gruul Monsters. We were able to bounce their land, just basically won us the game there. But really sucks against Mono Red. Demon Furior wouldn't be much better against Mono Red, I don't think, so I don't know if that really matters too much. And I do like a lot of these one-ofs. Artful Dodge, Sleep of the Dead, Spell Pierce. We didn't really get any good Force Spikes to this league, but I've gotten some pretty good ones in the past, so it's just up to you. And I will say that those decks I saw playing 8 Blue Elemental Blast effects, maybe they're needed, because if I had had just a single blast any of those times that they Kuldotha'd, I think I would have been able to take one of those games and had a much better shot. So I'm definitely thinking about adding 2 more Hydros, as long as I can fork out the like 12 ticks or whatever that they are. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.